started in just a minute. All right, it is 6 o'clock, so we will get started with our meeting this evening. And we'll start off with the land recognition statement. We recognize that the Hogan Administrative Center occupies the land of the Ho-Chunk people. Please take a moment to celebrate and honor this ancestral Ho-Chunk land and the sacred lands of all Indigenous peoples. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Baumann?
Here.
Ms. Berkedal? She will actually be excused for a moment. She just told me she's having issues logging in.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Here.
Dr. Garcia?
Here.
Dr. Jimenez?
Here.
Ms. Leahy?
Here.
Ms. Moots?
Absent.
Excused.
Oh, excuse.
She had let us know.
That's right. Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Korberg?
Here.
Mr. Spivey?
Here.
Did he hear here? Okay. Yep. Thank you, Shonda.
I believe that is everybody. So a quorum of the Board of Education is present. So the regularly scheduled meeting of April 17, 2023 is called to order. And we'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance. We could repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And then we'll move to the approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Tonight's agenda has previously been distributed to the board with a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Dr. Cooper-Stoll. We will move forward and approve the agenda as submitted unless there is a motion to amend. Is there a motion to amend? Hearing none, as a reminder, because this is a virtual meeting, we will have all roll call votes this evening. So, Laura, if you would proceed.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. The agenda has been approved, and we will move on to public speakers. It's the policy of the board to provide at its public meetings an opportunity for individuals to address the board. Comments about individual staff or personnel will not be allowed. Open meeting law prohibits the board from engaging in discussion or responding to matters that are not included on the agenda. All speakers are reminded that this same policy limits your time to speak to 5 minutes, and this time will be strictly enforced. And if I could ask the superintendent to keep track of the time and to notify the speaker when the time is running out.
I will do so.
Thank you. You're also asked to give your name and the school district where you reside at the beginning of your time for the public record. And our first speaker for this evening is Deb Sukla.
Thank you. My name is Deb Sukla. I live in the school district of La Crosse. I wish to address you tonight on 2 issues on your agenda. As you well know, I am one of the 4 candidates or individuals that was duly elected this month and will be joining this body next week. I am concerned about 2 significant issues on tonight's agenda that being taken care of before the 4 new members are seated. Those 2 items are the superintendent's revised contract and the bylaw changes. First, let me address the proposed bylaw changes. For the 17 years that I sat on this very board, we had students at the table with us. I always found the students' updates to be very important. More important, though, was having the students at the table there with us. Their presence kept us focused on why we were doing the important work that is done at that board table. And the students also provided very useful input to the various subjects that we discussed. I do not support removing the students from your bylaws. Clearly, you have operated the last few years outside of your bylaws by not having students present. So why rush to change these bylaws now before the 4 new members arrive next week? Please allow the new board members to have the chance to discuss options of how students can participate versus taking action tonight for something that 4 of you will not even be here to live with. Also, the bylaw changes gives the board a raise is a concern to me. The concern is not just the raise to board members, but an even larger increase to the board president. And while none of those raises in and of themselves are a huge amount of money, it is the principle of it and the public appearance. You just asked the public for an extra $10.75 million a year, and one of the first things you do is give yourselves a raise. The one thing all of us candidates heard on the public trail is the public's very serious concern about accountability and transparency with the school board. That concern is not just about those of us who are running this year. That concern still is very much out there and is something you all will face when you are up for re-election in the next year or two. So please take this opportunity to think about this concern and what your public's asking for and to not take action on the bylaws. My second concern is that as an incoming board member, I'm very disappointed that an action as important as the superintendent's contract is being rushed and taken up for action before we arrive. The superintendent, as you know, is our only employee, and those 4 of us, new board members, will have our hands tied for a full year. Allowing the 4 outgoing board members to give the superintendent a raise before they head out the door is the very kind of thing that causes our citizens in this community. Therefore, I ask that you take this topic until for 1 week. If you're unable to do so, perhaps you would give serious thought to pulling that item out of the consent agenda and explain to your public what is being considered. As I said earlier, your public is very concerned about the lack of transparency and accountability. And by moving that agenda item to the public discussion, you would take a very important step by providing open communication to the public that you are elected to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Carla Doolittle. Carla, you're muted.
There we go. How about now? My name is Carla Doolittle, and I reside in the city of La Crosse, and I am just a concerned member of society here with the rest of the public. And so I have a few different issues here tonight, and one of them is 401, which is the superintendent's revised contract, the board members' revised contract, and concerns on the public knowing that this is actually happening when it's kind of buried in the agenda, along with the retirements and the new employees. And so when we, the public, went to the public meetings that were held on the $60 million referendum ask, which is $40 million more than it had been, and the public approved it knowing full well you would make those cuts to those teachers, we asked what was included in that $60 million. We were told counselors and investing in counselors, social workers, security, improvements to buildings, etc., programs and personnel, maintain small school sizes, attract and maintain teachers. These are the lists that I wrote down at the public informational meetings given by the superintendent. Never in here was anything about maintaining and attracting good board members or paying more to the board members or any of the board at all. And so for the fact that you are now voting on that tonight, while you have 4 outgoing board members and 4 new incoming next week, is again, transparency is a problem with the school board right now. Trust with the school board is a problem right now. This item should be removed from the agenda tonight. You are trying to build transparency and trust with the public, and this is not the way to go about it. I think it is completely manipulative and hidden and adds to the distrust that the public has in the board as a whole right now. And by doing that with 4 outgoing board members, I think it's weaselly and distrustful and distasteful, if you ask me. The other one was on 702, which is the student representative. And I agree that a student representative should be on there. They should have been on there for the last 3 years, but they haven't, which is technically a violation of the bylaws that we have in place. So by eliminating the student position, are you trying to cover the fact that you haven't had one for the last 3 years and nobody's really paid attention to that fact that according to the bylaw, it should have? According to the bylaws, it says that the mission of the school district to ensure accountability to the public and ensure effective communication and collaboration with the community. That's not the way to go about it. I just don't think that closed sessions happening a week before you have 4 new board members on the board is the way to go about it. I think any item should be pulled tonight with regard to anything important until the new board is put in place. I just think that it's just weaselly and dishonest, and it will just lead to more distrust of the public with the board as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Scott Newmeister.
Thank you, and I apologize, my camera is not working, so you don't get to see my beautiful face. But I just want to agree with the other 2 speakers, both Carla and Deb, on our opportunity here to really switch the way the current community is seeing our board. And I'm not saying you are doing this on purpose or any stretch of the imagination, but this is just what they're seeing. So I hope we pull these 2 agendas out. One, the superintendent's revised contract, and the other is obviously the student representative. Two key pieces that I believe that should be held out. If nothing else, it should be taken out of the consent agenda. And I agree with Deb Sukla on that we should pull that out and make it publicly known exactly what these consist of, what these income raises, etc., are part of. And we need to really consider getting our student representative back into the board, because it's an important piece, and I believe it builds not only camaraderie with the students, but also the teachers. So I appreciate you considering these 2 items, and I will see you in next week. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker tonight is Mike Richmond.
I'm Mike Richmond. I live in the school district of La Crosse. And as I got news of this, news early today, I have a lot of windshield time, and I sat and wondered, what are you thinking? I looked at Dr. Engel at a meeting at Emerson before the operating referendum, and I told him, I said, I will back this, but I don't know how much trust is left in this city. And by doing what you guys are doing tonight with the agendas is, I don't know, it's bass backwards in my view. But I sit here and wonder, in the tough times we're in, this board is giving the new board a raise. And I guess I don't understand it, but I'm pretty sure I really do understand it. Nobody was drafted into this position. Everybody campaigned. Everybody that campaigned. The new people that are going to be on the board next week, they campaigned. They wanted to do this. The money is not huge. It's not like it's a second job for you or a first job. But then I look at the school board president, a 25% raise. This is the same person that said we couldn't get anybody 5% as a teacher. I don't understand it. And I also am wondering how this got buried into the agenda too with the superintendent's revised contract. I'm sorry. It should be brought out in public, really, what are you voting on, how much it is. And for somebody that spent $300,000 that just got wasted away on a building that we never had to buy in the first place, I just hope this board can hold out on this for 7 days. I don't think it's going to hurt anybody. I appreciate the time. Have a good night.
Thank you. With that, our public speaker section of the agenda is concluded, and we'll move on to recognitions and to our board member recognitions. So I joked with Laura a little bit this morning that our board members who are leaving the same way they came in, virtually. So, you came in during the pandemic. Sadly, because of the weather today, the virtual meeting was the best option for us. And I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to Lori, Shondell, Brenda, and Emily for the work that they have performed on this board. You have been a great part of this board and provided great insights. I think the district has moved forward a lot due to your influence. And so just wanted to open up to the rest of the board members for their comments if they have any.
I have some that I can share. I guess I kind of thought of this in terms of the 3 outgoing who are finishing a 3-year and Emily's partial year. So I'll address the 3 first. So to Mr. Spivey, Ms. Leahy, and Dr. Cooper Stoll, thank you for your years of service to the school district. During your term, you ushered the district through a global pandemic, saw the transition of a new superintendent, helped to establish a culture of assessment and evaluation, and also, with the partnership of the superintendent, put the focus on educational equity in everything that we do. I really appreciate the perspectives that you brought as parents and educators and former district staff members. I think that perspective is pretty unmatched, and we will miss that. I also really appreciate the work that you have done to help ease my transition on the board. This is my 3rd year, but I still feel pretty fresh and new. So thank you for that. And then to Ms. Moots, although she's not here tonight, I'll say it for the record. Thank you for stepping up to the challenge of leading the district at a very difficult time. I appreciate the perspective you brought as a former teacher in the district, and we'll miss your comments, especially in your advocacy for staff and teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Baumann. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to mention a few things. Annie did a great job of summarizing the kinds of things that the members went through. But again, it's being part of a public board is never easy. You always have to be there for criticism and those kinds of things. And I think you all handled it well. And I think you all did listen to the community, and you had great service and dedication. And I thank you for the perspectives that you all brought individually from all of your backgrounds and all your areas. And I just want to let you know that I grew from each one of you, knowing each one of you and working with each one of you. And I appreciate that. And again, thank you on behalf of the community for your service and dedication.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Other board members?
I'll go.
Thank you.
This is Katie. I just had to restart my app so I can get the mic to turn on. One of the things that attracted me to run for office and join the school board of La Crosse was working with people like Brenda and Shondell and Lori.
And 1 year was just not enough to absorb and learn from the three of you. And I really enjoyed working with you, and this isn't an easy role. And I so appreciate the commitment and the dedication that you've spent in however long you all were on the board. I know it's varying times for all three of you. And you will be missed. Thank you very much. And thank you to Emily as well for filling in and stepping up and taking on the role that you did in this interim period.
Any other comments before I turn it over to our three board members who are leaving us that are present?
Can I just chime in to say thank you so much for setting such a great example in the meetings, for asking tough questions and really paying attention to the details in these policies. That's, where everything happens. And so I appreciate Shondell, Lori, Brenda, having watched you and learned from you as I've sort of rounded out this first year. And thanks to Emily for stepping up, having teacher so close to having been in the classroom, having that voice represented here was really important. So thank you.
Thank you. I probably should turn it over also to the administration if any of the administrators wanted to make any comments before I turn it over to the other board members.
I would just say I've been very thankful for each of your perspectives. Brenda, I appreciate your connection to the community and the ways you brought your personal experiences in the school district as a parent and somebody who is a collaborator with the school district. Shondell, I've really appreciated your perspective as a man of color in our community and somebody who challenges the school district and has a unique understanding of public education. And it has been great working with you in this capacity. And Dr. Cooperstall, thank you for all you've done to move the school district forward over the last 6 years, transitioning to a form of governance that is more accountable and one that I have grown to greatly appreciate in how transparent it is to our community. So thank you each for your incredible work and the support you've given me over the last 2.5, 3 years.
Thank you. Any other administrators wanted to chime in before I turn it over to the board members? I'm not seeing any microphones turn on, so either Brenda or Shondell or Lori, either one of you want to start?
I'll go ahead. So my experience has been awesome. It's been a great learning experience. Coming from the perspective of volunteering in the district to being an employee in the district to then serving on the board of this district. And I just appreciate the wealth of knowledge and experience that I've gained being able to work with all of you. It's been extremely helpful. I'm a systems guy, so it's always good to learn another system. And I would just want to say, I want to thank the teachers and the students for all the work and the administrators for all the work that they do in this district. The decisions that we make as a school board is never easy. It's always a lot of thought, a lot of conversation that goes into those things. And I just want to say that I hope, and it is my goal anyway, was to be able to make sure that I was representing the community and representing our students and our teachers while I was at this table. And so asking the tough questions is a part of that. Also making decisions and tough decisions is a part of that as well. And so I just want to say thank you to the community and all the constituents that voted for me. Again, thank the board members for all the work that you all have done. Administration, thank you for what you've done as well. And to the outgoing board members, it's been great serving with you as well.
Thank you, Shondell. Lori or Brenda?
It's been a true honor to be on the board. Being elected and taking office during the pandemic really was difficult, and I relate to our students that struggle with online learning because it is not the mode for me. I feel like I had a much slower start being acclimated to being on the board, and I finally feel like I understand what's going on and my role in coherent governance. Not the budget, though. I don't know if I'll ever get the budget, but even though I was active in the schools, it's when my children were in the schools, it really was a steep learning curve. So there is so much to learn and be on the board. And I'm so grateful for everyone who helped me along the way. I am leaving even prouder of our school district, and I am true supporter of public education and always will be, and hope I can find another way to continue to do that. And I'm forever grateful for the amazing staff and teachers that we have, because I know they go above and beyond whatever they can do to serve our students. And anything that we can do to retain this wonderful staff, we need to do. And I thank everyone and wish the board my best and good luck. And I look forward to following what you do in the future.
Thanks, Brenda. Lori?
Okay, so on the one hand, it feels like a very long 6 years. And in the last couple of days, I've been like, how are we here at the last board meeting? I remember when I took my oath, Tom Thompson, Dr. Tom joked right afterward and said, oh, you don't know what you've gotten into. Brad may remember that. And I said, oh, I don't think you know what you've gotten into. It's been, there have been many things I'm going to take from the experience that I'm just very, very grateful for the people I've served with on the school board, for our administrators, for our teachers, and for our staff and the families. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I'm grateful to all who have been able to serve with. So I'll still be here supporting the district and supporting the work that we do. It's what we all do, right? And for my outgoing board members, Brenda and Shondell, I'm so glad I got a chance to serve with both of you in this last term. So thank you so much for your service and for what you do for our community.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Because I think it's also important for me to say this, and I regret that I didn't say it in the beginning, but also to the families and community members, thank you. And also, as a Black man sitting on this board, and currently the only visible, well, not actually. So as a Black man sitting on this board, only Black person on this board, I think that it's extremely important for individuals of color to step up into positions like these. And so I hope that in the future we see a more diverse board, both school board as well as throughout our city and county as well, in positions of power like these. And so I just feel like that's really important to mention.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for sharing those thoughts. And yes, you will all be sorely missed. And hopefully I'll find you soon and maybe take you out to lunch or give you a hug, since we couldn't do that this evening. And I feel really badly about that. But, being in the comfort of your home sometimes is not necessarily a bad thing either. So we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, the approval of the superintendent's consent agenda. So the consent agenda is a mechanism that's used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. Are there any items that the board members want to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, if I could have a motion and a second.
I make a motion to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. The motion by Dr. Cooper Stoll and a second by Mr. Spivey. The items on the superintendent consent agenda will be approved as presented after a roll call vote. So Laura, if you could take care of that for us.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Bergdahl?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. So we'll move on to the approval of the board consent agenda. Are there any items that the members want to remove from the board consent agenda? Seeing no microphones turn on, then if I could get a motion and a second, please.
I make a motion to approve the items on the board consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Cooper Stoll, seconded by Ms. Leahy to approve the items on the board consent agenda, and these will be approved as presented after a roll call vote. And I'll turn it over to Laura again.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Berkeveld?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. And so we will move on to our next item, the quarterly budget report, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel.
And I will quickly turn it over to Ms. Sprang to talk through our financials for the last quarter.
Okay. Dan, is there a way to get the financials up on the screen?
I can share them, Ms. Sprang.
Okay, that'd be great. And while we're waiting, I just wanted to say my thank you to Lori and Brenda and Shondell. It has been an honor to serve with you. And Brenda, you know more about the budget than you say, because I know you ask great questions, and I hope I can always answer your questions so that you understand. So we have the quarterly financials. The financials are included in the board agenda every month. However, we review them together on a quarterly basis. So these are our revenues as of the third quarter of March 31st, 2023. We compare last year's with this year. And we have to remember that our operating budget starts in July each year. However, a lot of our revenues don't even come in until January. So I would bring to your attention that at the end of March, we have had a good portion of our local taxes come in. As you can see, we do not have all of our taxes in. We do not receive the rest of those taxes until June and August. Our interest is important this year compared to last because of the interest rates are up in earnings. And also that includes any donations that are made from our public to our students. And then the other things that I'd like to bring to your attention are the state aid. The per pupil aid has come in now, and the AGR, the Achievement Gap Reduction Aid, and the State Equalization Aid. Not all of it, but a good portion of it comes in. Again, third quarter of the school district. We're already 3 quarters done with our school year, and now our revenue is starting to come in. So open enrollment does not come in until June. Also, the other state aid, the exempt computer aid, that does not come in until June also. The federal aids and grants, remember those are reimbursable aids, so we have to spend the dollars first and then submit for a claim. And then, of course, there's the other federal sources. And again, this year we had an unexpected grant that the technology director applied for that had to go to the connectivity expenses that we incurred with remote learning during COVID, and it will offset our technology lease payment for this year. So even after January through March, our revenues still are under the expenditures at this point. And so that is the reminder that our our fund balance needs to remain strong throughout the year, because otherwise we're going to end up short-term borrowing at a large expense to the district just to pay salaries and operating expenditures from July through March. So you can go to the next page, please. And this is our expenditures as we look at them. These are expenditures as function and purpose. And as you can see, they're very comparable to last year. I would bring to your attention always the co-curricular. Compared to last year, we were still experiencing not as many co-curricular activities due to COVID, but now we're getting back on track and our students are able to play sports and have other activities supported by the budget. Our open enrollment out and our vouchers payments, those are not paid out until June. Other things, the school administration is actually the administration at the schools. It's very comparable. The building and operations and maintenance, we had expended a good amount of money for HVAC at Central, and that was paid for through ESSER funding. Non-employee insurance and consulting, of course, that is your unemployment insurance, your liability, your property insurance, and your workers' comp insurance. Otherwise, as you can see, the percentage of expenditures is comparable to last year, so we are right on track. Could you go to the next page, please? So here we have the expenditures, same totals, but just presented in a different way by type and object. And some of the overall totals are the same as the expenditures, but broken down differently. And of course, our highest expenditure, because education is a service, so naturally salary and benefits are the largest portion of our budget. Health insurance, if you look at the budget for health insurance last year compared to this year, we did narrow our network to save some costs. And we will be looking at some health insurance adjustments in the coming year too. Open enrollment out, again, is not paid until June. And is there any questions from any of the revenues or expenditures and how they're presented or the numbers that you see?
Questions from the board members? Not hearing any. Ms. Sprang, I do have a question. If you could give us a little bit of insight. So on this page, on the operation expenditures by type. So dental and dental and life LTD and long-term care seem to have quite a big jump. Utilities and fuel seems to have a big drop. Anything you could enlighten us with on those items?
Are you talking the budget or the expenditures?
The expenditures. So I see this is the third page that we were just on.
Sure.
In 21-22, life LTD long-term care was 67.1%. And then this year it's at 80.6 at the same time frame. The same thing with dental, 68.5 to 85.1.
Right.
Go ahead.
That's the percentage of the budget. So as you can see, our budget was reduced in 22-23. So that amount is comparable, but it's the percentage of the budget that has been spent.
And same thing with utilities and fuel?
Right. We increased our utilities budget, but the spending is comparable to last year. After today, who knows? I mean,
that's going to be my next question.
Yeah, we had to actually put our blades back on our vehicles to remove the snow because they had to come in yesterday to do that because they had already taken them off so they could attach the lawnmowers.
I have a question. As we talk about school districts being of service, and so it's quite natural that a lot of the money would go towards salaries. Can you shine a little light on how much of the board salary impacts the school district?
Very minimally. It's a small fraction. And there has not been an increase in board pay, I think, in 20 years or more. So you do a big job for a small amount of compensation. And so we appreciate you.
It was actually more than 20 years. I think the last time that it was changed was 1999. And since that time, it's gone down.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Ms. Spring on the quarterly budget report? Hearing none. Thank you, Ms. Spring, for the presentation and for keeping us up to date on the budget. So we'll move on to the next. Yep. We'll move on to the next item, Operational Expectation Monitoring Report, OE1, Global Operational Expectation. So this was the one that we just dealt with at the last meeting, and the administration does not have any recommended changes. Does the board have any changes to suggest for OE1? I'm not seeing any microphones turn on, so then I will take that as no changes from the board members as well. And then we'll move on to the legislative update and advocacy regarding the state biennium. So as we all know, the beginning of a biennium is probably one of the most fraught times for school districts and a lot of municipalities, because that is the time where we have no idea what the state is going to do. We can estimate, we can look back and look at trends, but you never know what is going to happen. The second year in a biennium is much easier because we already have those numbers decided. So we wanted to take this time and maybe talk to Dr. Engel as well about what advocacy could our community do? What advocacy could board members do at a beginning of a biennium when the legislature is looking to create a budget for the next 2 years? So if I could turn it over to you, Dr. Engel, for your insights.
Thank you, Dr. Jimenez. One of the ways right now is through the joint finance hearing process. There are 4 opportunities across the state. 3 have already occurred, one in Waukesha, one in Eau Claire, one in the Wisconsin Dells. And then there's a 4th opportunity on April 26th up in Minocqua. Tough to get up there in person or to any of these because they're during the day when folks have to work. It's tough to take a day of vacation or to get out of your regular job to go be able to speak at these. However, they do have contact information, and you can send budget comments to the committee at budget.comments@legis.wisconsin.gov, and I can share that with each of you as well. I was fortunate to be able to get up to Eau Claire to speak on behalf of La Crosse Public Schools, along with the 4 other superintendents in La Crosse County. So was up there with the superintendents from Holman on Alaska, West Salem, and Bangor. We all have similar experiences and needs, especially over the last 3 years with the pandemic and a budget that has provided 0 increases to revenues for school districts. And so it was a great opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. We actually were the second to speak. I made sure to get up there early, so we got early on the docket. And a lot of superintendents have been speaking to the school, to the Joint Finance Committee. I think 54 were scheduled to speak at this last Joint Finance Committee. I think 30 some spoke down in Waukesha, and I think another 30 or 40 spoke in Wisconsin Dells. We're getting close to a third to half the superintendents across the state representing public education at those events. Shortly after these hearings are done, the state legislature will propose a biennium budget themselves. They'll likely fully rewrite the governor's budget, and then there will be hearings at the Capitol in each of the different committees on elements of the budget. Those will be limited and hard to get to, but they often take written comments as well. And so encourage folks to reach out to your local legislatures, as well as the folks on each of these committees, including the Assembly and Senate Education Committees. And so there's opportunity throughout this process to continue to communicate with legislators. There are a few bills going through the Assembly and the Senate Education Committees right now. One's to add a half a credit of financial literacy to graduation requirements. We already do that here in La Crosse, so it wouldn't impact us. Another is related to the private school parental choice program and creating an automatic application process for subsequent years. And another is posting contact information in schools to report child abuse and neglect. Some of these are more bureaucratic in nature, others have some value. And so it's good to, as those come up, to evaluate them and identify how you feel about them and reach out to your legislators if you feel it necessary. With that, I'll take any questions from my perspective, or if others have advice in their past as it relates to legislative advocacy, I'm sure all would appreciate it.
Absolutely. I would just, remind the board members who are staying, as well as the new board members coming in, that keeping a good relationship with our local legislators is one good piece for advocacy for our school district. Having those ears open and available for our comments. They are always looking for our thoughts regarding education, and I've really appreciated working with our legislators in this area who are very committed to public education. So, but I'll open it up to the board members. As Dr. Engel had asked, are there any questions or any of your own tips or tricks on legislative advocacy?
I think that we've had over the years some very strong and powerful people with powerful voices come before this board. And I would just encourage folks to use their voices to, truly and strongly advocate for the budget and making sure that the districts and education is getting funded properly. In addition, I know that sometimes it can be difficult, but there are also ways, and Dr. Engel, maybe you can speak to this, the ways to do the written response to the budget narratives a little bit. Because I know that not everybody likes to speak in public, and maybe that's another way that they can also advocate. But I definitely think people need to recognize that your voice is really important and powerful. And we've witnessed our district go through so many changes, and this is the type of advocacy that we need right now.
Yeah, I think local legislators are always the best first point of contact. So our local representatives and local senators that represent us. But then the Joint Finance Committee as a whole is also a great second step. And then on specific budgets, or specific budget items, the Education Committee is also. There's the email address that I threw in the comments, that is an opportunity for folks to reach out to the whole group. But petitioning individuals is also appreciated as well. What I hear continually from legislators and their aides is that they want to hear the stories that are behind the requests. So it's one thing to ask for revenue limit increases, but they want to know, what has zero revenue limit increases over the last 2 done to schools? How has it impacted our kids, our teachers, our experiences? And so being able to connect a story to budget items has been really impactful to legislators. And so I encourage folks to think about not just the budget item, more, categorical aid for mental health, but what are some of the specific things that happened in our school district that we've been able to do, but without consistent ongoing funding, may be jeopardized if it's not placed into this budget. Things like social workers to help connect students to essential services, mental health counseling for immediate crisis needs, those sorts of things.
Any other board members? Thank you, Mr. Spivey. Any other board members? Okay. Not seeing any microphones come on. So thank you very much, Dr. Engel, for your comments. And again, just a reminder for the board members, if you have an opportunity to send an email or a letter to the local legislators or the Joint Finance Committee, I did see Dr. Engel put the email in the chat. So that way you have access to that email and can submit your own thoughts to those legislators. Moving on to matters reserved for board action. So policy approval, first reading bylaws, page 11, salary and expenses for board members and salary for student reps. So on this one, there, as Dr. Cooper-Stoll has mentioned, we have not seen an increase for the school board members in terms of the salary since 1999, and actually that year it did decrease. While other boards around the area have seen increases, we have not. But I know Dr. Cooper-Stoll had some comments that I wanted to turn it over to her.
Dr. Benez, do we need a motion first and a second to open for discussion?
Oh, great point. Why don't we do that? So can I have a motion and a second to approve bylaw, let's see, what's the language here? The great first reading for policy approval, the bylaws, page 11, salary and expenses for board members and salary for student representatives.
I'll make that motion. I make a motion to
Second.
grant the first reading for policy approval to bylaws, page 11, salary and expenses for board members and salary for student representatives.
All right, and I had a second for Mr. Spivey, so go ahead, Dr. Cooper-Stoll.
So a couple of years ago, when the board took up a discussion about any increase to board salary, one of the things we first noticed is, as I mentioned earlier, not only has that salary not gone up since 1999, it's actually gone down. And the reason why I've always felt that that was a concern was this. If we want to bring diverse perspectives to the board, if we want to bring parents to the board, parents have children, and our board meetings are at night or outside the regular workday, for example. And when people have to provide childcare, that costs money. For other people who are working in jobs where it overlaps with the time that our board meetings are, that's a loss of income to them as well. And so, first of all, I think that it's important that we are thoughtful about those voices that we want to bring to the board and how we best to support it. We are also the lowest paid publicly elected officials within our community. And as we've seen increases go up in other areas, like for the county board is just one example, for this exact same reason, it's also caused us to reevaluate and go out to other school districts to do comparisons in terms of those salaries as well. In addition to being able to provide supports in order to bring those diverse perspectives to the board, I think it's also important to know that when we first discussed this 2 years ago, we decided unanimously as a board not to bring this forward because we could not give our teachers and staff increases. And none of us were we're all in agreement that we didn't want to do it until that opportunity arose. Bringing it forward now allows us to be able to discuss that along with an increase to the board president salary, which I believe was an extra $25 per every 2 weeks. I served as president for 2 years on this board. And if it's done well, then it in and of itself is a job, a second job. And so I never asked for that increase when I served in that role, but I did ask for a consideration going forward for future people who take on that role, because I know what it's like firsthand to have served in that capacity. And I'll leave it there. I'm happy to offer further comment, but this is why I brought this forward 2 years ago, and I'm glad that we're revisiting it now.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper-Stoll. Any other board members want to make any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. I know we've Dr. Cooper-Stoll makes a number of good points that we've talked about over the years, and I know that we're haven't increased since 99, or I haven't had a change since 99, and that was a decrease, and that we are among the lowest board members. I like the idea of the increase per what employees get. I'm uncomfortable with the idea of giving myself a raise. And I just, to be honest, when I got on the board, I didn't even know I got paid. Because of that, I decided to funnel most of the money that we get into the Public Education Foundation. And I was able to establish an endowment. I was in that capability that I was able to do that, and that is something that I wanted to do. I guess I'm just uncomfortable with it at this point in time. I think it's got its merit, but if the increase goes, I'll probably increase my donation to the Public Education Foundation. But right now, I'm not comfortable with looking at the raise going.
Thank you, Mr. Korberg. There is one piece that you didn't mention, but there is a comment in there that the salary increases take effect at the next reorganizational meeting. And so it would be the next sitting board. Now, some of us are sitting on this board table will be here at the next reorganizational meeting, but it is for any time that there's an increase, it's for the next sitting board, not the current sitting board. And I think that's also an important point. Other comments from board members?
As was mentioned earlier, I think that, and a lot of folks have mentioned, the school board is one of the lowest paid boards currently. And I think it's okay to make that right. I think also acknowledging, Mrs. Spring comments earlier as well, of this is a very minute part of the budget. And contrary to popular belief, this isn't just a decision that we're making just because we passed the referendum. This conversation has, again, been happening for years. We've just been very strategic about putting it off continuously. And so I think as an outgoing board member and recognizing the impact that this salary has, you also have the option of being able to give it back to the students, right? And give it back to the district. And so if you so choose to do that, then you so choose to do that. But I also agree, if we do want to continue to add different perspectives, such as parents or other folks to this board, increasing a salary a little bit would not harm. In fact, I think it would actually serve its purpose and do right by the community and the members and folks who are wanting to join the board and the people that are on the board, and spend a significant time doing homework outside of meetings and also coming to meetings prepared. So that is where I stand with it.
Other comments from the board members?
I'd like to add too that it seems to be in the way of a lot of the decisions and actions we've had to take over the last year and we'll have to take over the next few. It's been something that's been put off and put off and put off, thinking someday the day will come when it will be the right time, and we'll turn around and find that 25 years have passed and this issue hasn't been resolved. And so I think taking an opportunity to resolve it is important.
Other comments? I'm not seeing any microphones come on. So
I
can
go next.
Go ahead.
So when I, knowing that this was on the agenda, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I've been trying to tick through my head the impact of the increase for a board member. And the cost per paycheck is pretty minimal. I think it's going to be just like a $20 per paycheck increase for board members. So that impact, is not the impact on the budget, and maybe the impact on individual board members may not be as great. But I think if you start looking at the cost of childcare in the evening hours for, 2.5 to 3 hours, a couple times a month, and you don't count any of the extra stuff, that increase can be impactful for families who need it. And it can be a barrier to people participating in this process if they can't afford childcare, or if they don't at least break even with the compensation that board members make. So I tried to see what the average cost to parents would be for evening childcare for people in La Crosse. And when I looked at the rates on care.com, where you can see people who are advertising their services for daycare, it looked like an average of depending on experience and whether they have a car, between $15 to $29 an hour. So to attend one board meeting, that cost is $52 to $101.50 for a family. And so thinking about working class folks or single parents or families who have, one of the adults is a shift worker and works evenings, and that childcare piece has kind of pushed me towards supporting this, but I still struggle with the optics of it. I know that in terms of reducing barriers to access the board, this would be an important increase. And so that piece is kind of pushing me towards that. And when I tried to like break down all the hours that I put in just to like see what my hourly wage is. It's really hard to quantify because there's so much time that goes in beyond the hours that you're showing up. So there's our board meetings and workshops. There's our linkages. There's professional development. This past year, there was a whole bunch of referendum information sessions. And then there's all the hours of emails and phone calls and preparing for meetings and doing research so that you feel like you can engage in the conversation with the other board members. And I didn't really know like how to quantify total hours worked, but when I did the math and the hourly rate, and I don't even think it's appropriate to think of the work that we do as compensated at an hourly rate, it was very low. And so, knowing that nobody serves on the board as a job, this is not a salary, this is just compensation. I kept coming back to that daycare piece and the impact on families and individuals who would want to participate. And I also came back to the cost of campaigning to get onto the board, which has only increased over the last 3 years since I've been on the board. And just in terms of participation, I'm still kind of struggled and I'm like on the fence. Like I know it makes sense to go forward, but I worry about kind of the trust that the district can maintain with the community and all of that. So I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Thank you. Other board members?
I would just say, to that point, first of all, thank you for doing that, because breaking that down sounds a lot. The optics will never be in our favor to do something like this. Had it happened before, let's say, the referendum, folks would have said, well, you're doing this because the referendum is coming. People would have been upset because we didn't give the full raise to teachers and we did partial. And the reality, too, is I think linking it to staff raises is important, too, right? So it's not like we're just raising the salary to just raise the salary. And it's not that we're going to raise our salaries and not raise teachers and, district staff salaries. And I think that's also important to kind of acknowledge as well.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Berkendall, I saw your microphone turn on, so go ahead.
I was just going to say that my sentiments are almost identical to Annie's, and she said it much better than I could have, but that's sort of where I'm at. Although I think Shondell just had a really strong point about the optics for something like this will never look good. That's all I have. No.
Thank you. I did notice, Ms. Steigerwald, that there is a typo in the second to last paragraph, education, ON, not NO. This annual salary for members of the Board of Education. So I don't know that we necessarily need an amendment to make that small change. So I'm just going to, once we get ready for voting, I'm just going to say that, we will correct any grammar issues that come forward with the board's consent. But any other comments from the board members prior to voting on this?
Okay, I want to also make a comment about the student representative piece. That is a part that I'm struggling with more than the salary, just because I wonder if there's still time to explore, an alternative, but keep it as part of the policy and have a year where student representatives are appointed. Since I've been on the board, they have not been an addition around the table. My personal thought on it is that student representatives should remain on the board. And that part of that included in this discussion, I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about before we start talking about whether we're supporting the revisions to the policy or not.
Well, to that point, Ms. Bauman, I also noted that the next item we're going to take up on the agenda are changes that also reflect changes with student reps. So I'm happy to engage in that conversation now or with the next change, suggested change.
Well, I think what I would say is if we want to have that conversation now, I think it would be in order, since there is language in here about student reps being paid an annual salary. And so I think it would be just fine under Robert's rules to have that conversation now.
Okay. I would agree, because if on the next agenda item we vote to keep student reps on the board, then we would have just taken away their salary. So I was sorry, what were you gonna say, Lori?
I was just going to provide some context for how we arrived at this moment.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So a few years back, one of the things that the board revisited was how best to utilize student input in our processes. Historically, we've had 2 board reps, one from each high school. The different schools handled the process differently as to how a student rep ended up on the board. But while valuable to have the student voice, it oftentimes was a series of updates and ongoings at the schools, which is important information. But the board engaged in a conversation about how we could bring more perspectives than just those in that very small role. I also talked to former student reps on the board to inquire from them how to make that experience more robust. So Dr. Engel and others, I believe, went to the schools and the student governments at those schools and engaged in discussions about how best to bring those perspectives in. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment. Dr. Engel, is it okay if I turn it over to you for you to speak to like what that was and how we engaged here? Because while I don't in any way want to diminish the wonderful perspectives we've had of students on the board, I think other board members who have served with me during the time we've had student reps, it hasn't felt like we've done them justice by setting them up where they're really there just to tell us what, about upcoming events, as opposed to being really dialed in to the district. So Dr. Engel.
Thank you. I had an opportunity to speak with some students in our schools, and what we ended up moving towards was a quarterly opportunity where I go to the school and meet with the student senate at Central, and I'm able to meet with the students, and they have questions, and I answer everything that comes up. It's been a good two-way conversation where they have had interesting inquiries about what's going on at a district level. What I have found based on my conversations with the students in our schools is that the things that they're interested in are more of an administrative nature. They want to know the nuts and bolts of things, how things are working, how it impacts their school, what can they do to make a change where they're at. And that has been a great opportunity quarterly over this last year and a half. And then there's also, I think, an opportunity for our board to meet through linkages, how the board meets with other groups in our community. And it's not just a single student or two, it's as many as are present. So there's potentially a more robust opportunity, although not as ongoing as the student rep process. That's what we've been doing lately. It's led to more engagement at my level and engagement at the board level, but it is different than what had been done previously.
I also would add that we did have 2 student board members we have a third high school, Polytechnic, and that school did not have a student representative on the board. So that's something to consider. And yes, when there were student reps on the board, most of the time it was like calendar things that were happening within the last month, and then a few things that were happening next month. And I think it was a challenge for the board members, the student board members, to dig into the nuts and bolts of the policy discussions we were having. I think that the connection with our student governments may provide us a more robust way to get student feedback than the student reps at the board table. I think if we're truly wanting to get feedback, I think Dr. Engel made a good point that the more broad brush conversations we have, the greater the group that we meet with, the better the insight is. So those would be my comments. Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
I would also just add that we've always, as a board, taken the approach with student reps that they're busy. And so anytime they've had other things going on, they've been excused from board meetings, which has often led to absences or leaving early. And again, it is not in any way to diminish the service of the student reps, but this was not working very well in terms of how it was currently structured because of that. And I think also the nature of our governance structure is such that it is difficult at times for students to engage in those conversations, and students are not publicly elected, which means they also, by law, cannot vote on things that the board does as well. And so this has been part of a 3-year process to figure out how to best engage students and have more of a student voice. Because if it is a matter of someone being appointed at a school or being asked to run, or it's merely, when student reps aren't elected in ways that mirror the way board members are elected, it also means that you are disengaging a number of valid perspectives in those schools from serving on the board. And so that's the history of that. That's the context. It has never been about silencing student voice. On the contrary, it has been about how do we engage more student voices with the board.
So what ideas do we have for that? Because I think we can, something that I believe strongly in, not only here, but working in nonprofits, is how do you include the voices of the people you serve in your decision making? And I understand that we haven't had student reps for several years, but we also aren't engaged in meeting with the student councils like Dr. Engel is. And linkages are great, but they're often at a time that doesn't work for this board, who all has full-time jobs and can't be places at 3 p.m. So I would like to explore, before we make a change to the bylaw, I think we need to have something better in place. If the justification for getting rid of it is that it wasn't working as well as it could have, and we need a better way of interacting with students, let's figure out that better way before we disengage from an established process. Like if that looks like a youth advisory committee that we bring pertinent matters to students about to get their opinions and engagement before we meet as a board. I don't know what that looks like, but it makes me uncomfortable to change this part of the bylaws without a superior alternative.
So here's what I would suggest. I would suggest that this particular change to this bylaw can easily be a standalone policy around board member salary. So removing discussion of student reps and salary from this piece, I don't think is going to ultimately change the structure, Katie, that you're expressing concern about. I think that comes about perhaps through the next item on the agenda that talks about student reps as well. So I'm wondering if perhaps that might not be a bylaw, or perhaps that's a bylaw that we revisit or that we table. But I would say changing this particular policy so it specifically is in regards to the changes that have been suggested around board member salary in no way necessarily would impact what might happen with that next. If the board decided to, for example, they can make changes and go back to how it was done before, I would hope it would be something better.
So my question would be, would we then need to make an amendment to not take away the student representative piece until, like, to vote on this piece?
So what I would say is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Cooper-Stoll, just because I want to capture your thoughts correctly. At this point, bylaw page 1 really could be just salary and expenses for board members, period. Right? And so removing the language about student representative salary will not impact whether we have student representatives or not. That decision comes with the next policy conversation that we're going to have. And I believe what Dr. Cooper-Stoll was trying to say, and I'm just trying to say it a different way so that I know that I'm understanding it correctly, is that in the future, if we want, we can table the next conversation, and the board together in a subsequent meeting could ask to bring that policy back up for discussion. Potentially, one option could be that there is a separate page of the bylaws that specifically deals with student representation as well as student salaries. So the removal of the language here of student representative salaries could then be brought back at that other conversation where you could create potentially 2 different policies. If the board decided they could create just the one and then add that language in, they could create a separate policy that's just student salaries and separate it out. So in the grand scheme of things, I think the concerns that the board members are having really will rest with that next conversation.
Yes, I believe you captured that.
Probably more long-winded than you, but yeah, so hopefully that makes sense to the board members. Okay. Seeing some nods. I'm not seeing microphones to speak up in a different way here. So with that, then if I'm not seeing any more comments, then we can proceed to a vote. And I'm not seeing any microphones turn on, so I'll give it one more second. Seeing none, then we will proceed forward with the granting first reading for policy approval to bylaw page 11, salary and expenses for board members and salary for student representatives, with that ability to correct any grammatical things that will not change the meaning of the bylaws as we see it in front of us. So Ms. Steigerwall, a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye.
Ms. Bergeville?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Corbett?
Nay.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. Thank you very much, board members. And so we will move on to 7.02, which is bylaws page 1, which is the student representation, number of board members, term and oath of office. So again, before we get started, if the board would like to table this, then I would ask for a motion and a second to table the first reading for policy approval. So
I'd like to make that motion. I'll make a motion to table it.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. So motion by Mr. Corbett, second by Ms. Berkedal to table first reading policy approval to bylaws page 1, student representation, number of board members, term and oath of office. So because we are tabling it and this is our last meeting, we don't need to set a time frame for that because the next meeting of this board will be a brand new board, and that new board can make whenever they want to bring it up, they can. So roll call vote, please, Ms. Steigerwald.
Ms. Baumann?
This is the table, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Aye.
Ms. Berkedal?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. Thank you, board members. So we have tabled that policy approval, and we'll move on to 7.03, which is a closed session. The La Crosse Board of Education will consider a motion to move into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, sub 1 sub C, for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, the professional staff employment, resignation, preliminary notice of contract non-renewal, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 118.22. Could I have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Steigerwald?
Can I have a motion in a second?
Oh, sure, fine. You can have that too.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, got a lot of seconds, so I'm just going to pick one out of the hat. So motion by Mr. Spivey, second by Ms. Leahy, to move into closed session for the purposes stated in Wisconsin Statute 19.85 sub 1 sub C. So now we can have a roll call vote, I hope, Ms. Steigerwald.
Yes. Ms.
Thank
Baumann?
you.
Aye.
Ms. Berkedal?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. So we will move into closed session. We will just wait for those in attendance who are not board members to step away, and we will then move into closed session.
He is ready. We are good to go.
Okay, why don't we go ahead?
Thank you for the patience.
Yep, thank you. Are we recording? Okay. If we're recording, then we'll go ahead and get started. We'll move into announcements, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Bauman for her announcements.
Yeah, so this last week, the La Crosse Public Education Foundation delivered grants to classrooms and schools. 22 grants were delivered, totaling $41,500. And there was a lot of really great applications. Similar to in the fall, there was a lot of focus on, supporting curriculum, reading and math, and some professional development. So I'll just mention two real quick that kind of stood out to me. A grant was awarded for the music teachers to receive some professional development and how to include more culturally responsive music curriculum. And that's super neat because it's not just one classroom and one school. That will be spread throughout a few different classrooms. And then the SMART training, which is an acronym. And if Dr. Harsey is still on here, maybe he can tell me exactly what each letter means. But pre-K through first grade teachers will receive this professional development. And that was one of the larger grants that was awarded. And Nell also asked me to thank Dr. Harsey for joining in on the grants committee and helping to identify when there are grants that the district can fund, and kind of collaborate on that process. So that's all I have today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Bauman. The only announcement I have is a reminder that our next meeting is the reorganizational meeting, which is always the last Friday in April where the new board sits. And we will elect our officers, and I will not be running as president. And so my hope is that somebody else will take up those reins, and look forward to having new leaders in new roles as we move forward into the next year. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel.
The only announcement I have is we have our first facility advisory committee meeting on the 20th from 6 to 8:30, and look forward to engaging in that process.
Excellent. And so we do have two agenda planning items. And so if I could have a motion in a second for the first one of April 24th.
I'll make a motion to approve the April 24th, 2023 Board of Education reorganizational agenda with any additions or corrections.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Korberg, seconded by Mr. Spivey to approve the April 24th, 2023 Board of Education reorganizational agenda with any additions or corrections. Roll call vote, please. Ms. Stegerwald.
Ms. Bauman.
Aye.
Ms. Berkedal.
Aye.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll.
Aye.
Dr. Garcia.
Aye.
Ms. Leahy.
Aye.
Mr. Korberg.
Aye.
Mr. Spivey.
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez.
Aye. And now for the last vote for our outgoing board members is the May 1 agenda planning.
I'll make a motion to approve the May 1st, 2023 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections.
There's a second.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Korberg, seconded by Mr. Spivey to approve the May 1, 2023 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections. Roll call vote, please. Ms. Stegerwald.
Ms. Bauman.
Aye.
Ms. Berkedal.
Aye.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll.
Aye.
Dr. Garcia.
Aye.
Ms. Leahy.
Aye.
Mr. Korberg.
Aye.
Mr. Spivey.
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez.
Aye. And then we'll move on to board debriefing. There's a lot to debrief in a virtual meeting where technology isn't working the greatest, but I want to thank you all for your patience as we move through the agenda on this wonderfully springy weather day where the wonderful water will probably get us some great flowers. And that's what I'm hoping for the future and for best wishes and exciting times for our outgoing board members. Any other comments prior to us adjourning from the board?
Sad day. See you all.
Yeah. That day. I just had one comment about agenda planning, but we didn't have any comments before the vote.
We don't usually have any comments on agenda planning.
Okay.
Yep.
Is it appropriate to talk about a suggestion for that here?
Since the vote is already taken, there would not be anything to change or to address at this point in time.
Okay.
But if there was things you wanted to add to the agenda, you just have to talk to the president.
That would be correct. So at this time, there would not be anything. But outside the meeting, there's always opportunities to discuss agenda planning.
Okay.
So then with that, then, everybody, thank you so much for a great evening. And this meeting is now adjourned.